Hi kiddos, it's Mrs. Carrera. We are going to finish up our book, Can You Keep a Secret? It's the last chapter, I believe. It's chapter 10. Here we go. Amy felt great. She had some special flowers for the party, and she had written a new poem. Best of all, she'd heard from Sarah. Yesterday, a postcard had come with Sarah's new address and the words, "Please write to me. I'm lonesome." Amy didn't want her friend to be unhappy, but she was kind of glad Sarah missed her. Last night, Amy had started a letter to Sarah. She'd finish it tonight. She wanted to tell Sarah all about the surprise party. While Amy was fixing the flowers, Sam came in the door. She wondered if Mike had told him about the snake. Mike had promised he wouldn't, but he might have told by mistake. Sam looked at the flowers. "Those are neat." She watched Sam go down the aisle. He was her friend. She didn't like keeping secrets from him. She was a little scared, but she went back to his desk. "Sam," she said, "I did something bad yesterday. I looked in your desk. I thought you had a frog." Sam laughed. "Did Ernie scare you?" "I jumped about 3 feet in the air. I wasn't expecting a snake, and then I don't think I closed the box all the way, so it was my fault he got loose. I'm sorry." "That's okay. You're not mad?" Sam shook his head. "You didn't do it on purpose." He smiled at her. "I'm glad you told me, though. I couldn't figure out how he escaped." "I won't mess with your desk again," Amy said. "I promise." "It doesn't matter," Sam said. "There's nothing in here but books and ratty papers." And there's a picture of her telling him the truth. Amy smiled as she went back to her desk. It was going to be a great day. Mike came into the room. "I didn't tell," he called out. "I didn't spoil the surprise." He came walking by her desk. He stopped and whispered, "And I didn't tell anybody about your secret either." "I knew you wouldn't," Amy said. That wasn't quite true, but Mike didn't have to know that. "I told Sam about how I looked in his desk and left the box open." "Oh, good," Mike said. Then he laughed. "What's the matter? Can't you keep a secret?" After the last bell, Mrs. Banks sent people out to her car. They brought back a cake and a punch bowl and boxes of party things, crepe paper and punch cups and paper plates. "The first thing we'll do," Mrs. Banks said, "is math." Everybody moaned. Mrs. Banks smiled. "I want each of you to put a problem on the board, and the answer to every problem will be..." Guess what number? 30, Amy called out. "That's right," Mrs. Banks said. "That's our magic number." Most people wrote easy problems like 5 times 6 or 10 plus 10 plus 10. Nate wrote 29 plus 1. Sam wrote 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 until he had 30 numbers. Everybody helped string crepe paper around the room. Mrs. Banks moved all the papers off her desk so that there was room for the punch bowl and the cake. After the room was decorated, they all copied their poems onto special paper that Mrs. Banks had brought. "I did my own poem," Mike called out. Nobody had to help me." "What's the matter?" Nate said. "Didn't you like the one I wrote for you?" Finally, it was time to go outside. They played soccer that day, but it wasn't a very good game. Everybody kept looking over at the other field where Mr. Warren's class was playing softball. Amy thought soccer was worse than softball. People always ended up kicking each other. She stayed off to the side and ran only when the ball came close. Then somebody kicked the ball out of bounds. It rolled toward the softball field. Amy trotted after it, but Mike was ahead of her. "I'll get it," he yelled. The soccer ball rolled onto the softball field. One of the outfielders picked it up and threw it to Mike. Mike put the ball on the ground and kicked it back to the soccer field. "Hey, Mike," Mr. Warren called out. "Are you getting ready for birthday cake?" Amy couldn't believe it. Mr. Warren knew about the party. Mike's mouth dropped open. After a long time, he said, "What?" "Isn't your mom going to have a birthday cake?" Mr. Warren asked. Mike walked over to Mr. Warren. Amy moved that way, too. She was being nosy, but she didn't care. "It's not my mom's birthday," Mike said. "I just said that." He looked down at the ground. "I was writing a poem for a girl." Mr. Warren smiled. "Hey, that's okay, Mike. I'll bet she likes it." Amy turned and ran back to the soccer field. She couldn't believe it. Mike writing a poem for a girl? That was as surprising as seeing the teacher's kiss. Who was the girl? She didn't think it could be her, but he had been nice to her lately. But writing a poem? When Mike came back to the soccer field, Fred ran over to him. "You didn't tell him about the party, did you?" "No," Mike said. "Next time I'll get the ball," Fred said. "That's fine with me," said Mike. Amy kept watching Mike. She wondered what he would say in a poem to a girl. When the bell rang, everybody ran back to the classroom. They all stood by the door and waited. "Let's be really quiet," Britt said. But people kept talking and laughing. When Mr. Warren opened the door, they all yelled, "Surprise! Surprise!" Then they sang "Happy Birthday." Mr. Warren looked really surprised. He kept shaking his head and laughing. Mrs. Sanchez, the principal, came in the door. For a second, Amy thought they were all in trouble. "I heard you have a cake down here," Mrs. Sanchez says, "and I'm starving to death." Before they had their cake and punch, the class read their poems. Sam went first. "I hope your birthday's cool. Too bad you had to come to school." Everybody laughed, but Mr. Warren said, "I can't think of any place I'd rather be." All of the poems were good. One girl had written her poem in the shape of the number 30. 8 people had haiku poems. Amy was glad she had done a new one. Carla did a list poem. On his birthday, Mr. Warren dreams of being tetherball champion, having everybody do their homework, catching a big fish, having a party, eating birthday cake, giving everybody in class an A. Greg surprised them with a funny one. "You might eat too much cake and get a tummy ache, so I'll be nice and eat your slice." Amy wished that she'd written a funny poem. Last night she'd written a new one, but it wasn't funny at all. Her hands were shaking when she stood up to read. "You're a neat teacher. You help us to read. You work on our writing and teach us what we need. You always are friendly. You know just what to say. And now it's your birthday. Have a really great day." "What a fine poem," Mr. Warren said. "Thank you so much, Amy." But then Fred said, "That ought to get you an A." Amy slid into her seat. Why did people have to be mean? "He's jealous," Brenda said. And Carla said, "Be quiet, Fred. That was a good poem." "I was just making a joke," Fred said. Mike said he wanted to be last. When it was his turn, he stood up and looked around the room. "I wrote this poem last night, and I did it all by myself." Then he read, "Happy birthday, Mr. Warren. I hope you have lots of fun. I hope you get lots of presents, and you like every one. Happy birthday, Mr. Warren. I hope you feel like a king. People thought I'd tell your secret, but I did not say one thing." Mike bowed, and everybody laughed. "That's right," Mr. Warren said. "This was a complete surprise." "And I wasn't writing a poem for a girl," Mike shouted. Some people laughed. Some said, "What's he talking about?" Mr. Warren smiled. "Mike had to trick me to keep me from spoiling the surprise." "See," Mike said to the class, "I kept the secret." Amy was glad in a way. It hadn't seemed right for Mike to be writing poems for a girl, but she still wondered what his poem would have said. Everybody had punch and cake. When Amy got her cake, Mrs. Sanchez told her, "I enjoyed your poem very much." 2 girls from Mr. Warren's class came through the door. "Mr. Warren," they called, "we need you back in our room." "I'll be there in 2 minutes," Mr. Warren said. He raised his hand. "Would you take your seats? I have something to say." "We get double homework tomorrow," Sam said. Mr. Warren waved him away. "What a great party. I loved all of your poems. Thank you very much. I don't know how you kept this a secret." "Hey," Nate said, "we can keep a secret." "Yes, you can," Mr. Warren said, "and I have another one for you. Only from now on, it's not a secret." He looked at them and smiled. "This summer, Miss Dean and I are getting married." Everybody started talking at once, saying, "Wow, and that's great." One boy said, "Phoo, I wanted to marry Miss Dean." Mr. Warren held up his hand. "We weren't going to tell anybody for a while, but somebody found out by accident. I want to thank her for keeping it a secret and letting me be the one to tell the good news." He looked straight at Amy, then smiled and winked. The whole class turned and looked at her. "I have to go back to my room," Mr. Warren said. "I think I may be having another party. Thanks for everything. I hope you'll help me by finishing this cake." Some of the boys headed to the front desk. When Mike came past, he whispered, "Don't worry, I'll never tell." Amy leaned back in her seat and smiled. She had lots of things to put into that letter to Sarah. Ooh, there is one more chapter. Chapter 11. Mike sat at his desk eating his second piece of cake. Mrs. Sanchez had cut the cake into small pieces so that everybody could have seconds. Trent couldn't eat sugar, so Mrs. Banks had brought a diet soda for him. But Fred had Trent get punch and cake anyway, so Fred had double helpings. "I need extra food," he said. "I'm a growing boy." Mike was very happy. Everybody had liked his poem, and he hadn't spoiled the surprise party. He had showed that he could keep a secret, especially if it was important. And here's a picture of Fred saying he's a growing boy. Even so, he was glad that he didn't have any more secrets. He didn't have to be careful now. But then he looked over at Fred eating his extra cake. Well, there was one secret left. While Mike ate, his feet started to march. In his mind, he began to write a new poem. I did not tell any secrets. They said I would, but I don't care. I can keep any secret, except about Fred's underwear. Mike looked around the room. He saw Amy sitting by herself. She was his friend, and with Sarah gone, she needed a laugh. Hey, Amy, he called out. I have something to tell you. And that's the end of our story. What do you think he's going to tell her? Probably about Fred's underwear, his pink underwear. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed Can You Keep a Secret? That's our last book for the year. I will see you guys next year. Bye.